Imagine you are managing the construction of a $3 billion airport terminal, and you are 6 months behind schedule.
Yeah, that is a total nightmare scenario right out of the gate.
Right, and the project is bleeding, say, $1 million a day in overhead and lost revenue. I mean, the press is circling.
Oh, absolutely. And the primary contractor and the employer are just sitting in a boardroom furiously pointing fingers at each other.
Exactly. The contractor is saying the employer changed the baggage handling system design 3 times.
And the employer says the contractor couldn't pour a concrete slab straight if their lives depended on it.
Right. Everyone is threatening litigation. So welcome to the deep dive.
It really is the ultimate high-stakes standoff. And the reality is, when a mega project like that goes sideways, the cause of the bleeding is rarely a single clean fracture.
It's a mess.
It is. It is a massive tangled web of competing failures.
Exactly. And our goal today is to untangle that web for you. We are simulating the kind of rigorous, closed-door debate you would find between senior chartered quantity surveyors and forensic delay analysts preparing for a massive arbitration.
Yeah, we are completely bypassing the basic definitions today.
Right. If you are here, you already know what a critical path is. We are going straight into the deep end of advanced project controls, commercial strategy, and forensic delay analysis.
Because honestly, reading standard industry protocols in a vacuum is one thing, but applying them under the immense pressure of a tribunal or a tense commercial negotiation where hundreds of millions of dollars are on the line, that is entirely different.
Right. So let's start with the absolute foundation of any major claim, which is separating the argument over time from the argument over productivity.
Crucial distinction.
But honestly, as someone looking at the commercial reality of a site, I have to push back on this right out of the gate.
Okay, let's hear it.
In the real world, a construction site is just chaotic. Time and money bleed together constantly.
They do.
Right. So if a contractor is stuck on site for an extra 6 months, they're losing money. If they're working inefficiently, they're losing money. So why is the industry so utterly obsessed with forcing us to treat, delay and disruption as 2 totally different isolated beasts? Aren't they essentially the exact same headache at the end of the day for you?
I mean, they absolutely feel like the same headache when you are standing in the mud on site. I'll give you that.
Right.
But the legal and commercial remedies for them are entirely different. If you conflate the two in a formal claim...
Like if you just bundle them up.
Yeah, if you just walk into an arbitration and say, well, everything was a mess, give us more time, more money, you are setting yourself up to be completely dismantled by opposing counsel.
Because you haven't proved causality.
Exactly. You have to separate the mechanics. Delay is strictly about time. It is concerned exclusively with activities on the critical path taking longer than planned.
Which ultimately delays the contractual completion date of the works.
Spot on.
And securing relief for that delay, so an extension of time or an EOT, that is fundamentally about stopping the bleeding, isn't it? Like it's a defensive maneuver.
It is entirely defensive, yes.
Because it provides relief from liquidated damages, or LDs, which the employer will aggressively levy if you finish late.
Precisely. Time means money, yes. But in this specific instance, delay analysis is about proving you shouldn't be penalized by the employer for missing the deadline. You are basically asking for the clock to be paused.
Right.
Disruption, on the other hand, is an entirely different mechanism. It is about a loss of productivity.
So it's not necessarily about the end date at all?
Not at all. It's a disturbance, a hindrance, or, an interruption to a contractor's normal, planned working methods. You are prevented from following the sequence you priced in your tender.
Give me a tangible example of how that plays out on-site without affecting the end date.
Okay, consider piecemeal site access. Say you are building a 10-mile highway.
Okay.
You plan to start at mile 0 and pave straight through to mile 10, highly efficiently. Just a straight shot.
Right. A nice linear operation.
But the employer hasn't secured all the land rights.
Classic.
Right. So they give you access to mile 2, then maybe mile 7, then back to mile 1.
Oh, that's a nightmare.
Yeah.
You are constantly demobilizing and remobilizing all your heavy equipment.
Exactly. You have out-of-sequence work. You have trades crowding each other when a sector finally opens up.
So in that scenario, the contractor might actually finish the 10-mile highway exactly on the contractual completion date.
Yes.
They didn't suffer a critical delay. But to hit that date, they had to throw double the labor at it, work night shifts, and effectively destroy their entire profit margin.
Exactly. Disruption causes severe financial loss even if the final completion date isn't impacted by a single day.
Wow.
So the remedy here is entirely offensive. It is a claim for compensation for the loss and expense, the actual cost of that lost productivity.
Okay, I see the clean legal distinction. Delay equals time, disruption equals money.
Yeah.
But surely they interact, right? You can't just put them in neat little boxes on a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure job.
Oh, they overlap constantly. And that is where the commercial strategy gets incredibly complex.
How so?
Well, disruption can easily snowball into a critical delay.
Okay, give me an example.
If your workforce is suffering a massive loss of productivity due to, say, constant piecemeal design variations from the architect.
So they are constantly tearing things down and rebuilding.
Right. Those specific activities might take so long that they eventually consume all the schedule float, hit the critical path, and actually delay the final completion date.
And the reverse must be true as well, right? A delay can cause a disruption.
Absolutely.
Let's say a contractor is delayed by an employer risk event. Maybe the employer failed to secure a vital permit for a concrete pour.
Very common.
But the contract administrator is playing hardball and denies the EOT. The contractor is staring down the barrel of ruinous liquidated damages. What's their immediate commercial reaction?
Panic. Pure panic. And then acceleration. They flood the site with labor to try and claw back the time.
Right. And the moment you flood a site with 3 times the planned labor, you get trade stacking.
Oh, massive trade stacking. You have electricians tripping over plumbers.
You get a massive dilution of supervision because you just don't have enough foremen for all those extra bodies.
Exactly. The initial delay caused the subsequent disruption. A seasoned professional acting for the contractor must claim for both. But, and this is a massive but, without double dipping.
Explain the double dipping trap, because I see this blow up in arbitration all the time.
You cannot recover the cost of the same labor hour under both a prolongation claim for the delay and a loss of productivity claim for the disruption.
Meaning?
If a guy is standing on site for an extra week because the project went long, you can claim his wages as a time-related prolongation cost.
Right, because he had to be there an extra week.
But you cannot also claim that same week of wages under a disruption claim, saying he was working inefficiently during that time.
Ah, you were asking for the same dollar twice.
Exactly. The arbitrator will spot the duplicated cost immediately, and it absolutely destroys the credibility of your entire quantum expert.
That makes perfect commercial sense.
Right.
You have to clearly map the causality.
You do.
But let's look at the foundation of any of these claims. If I'm sitting across from you in a tense commercial negotiation, the very first thing I'm going to demand to see is your baseline program.
Of course.
What are the strict, non-negotiable requirements a forensic analyst looks for in a baseline program to even consider it valid for an assessment? Because, I've seen contractors try to defend a $100 million claim with a stack of highlighted A3 PDFs.
Oh, we all have. And that stack of PDFs will get them absolutely nowhere in a serious tribunal.
Right. So what is the bare minimum?
First and foremost, native electronic files using CPM critical path method software are mandatory.
So we are talking Primavera P6, Asta Power Project, Microsoft Project.
Whatever the contract dictates, yes. I cannot stress this enough. A PDF of a Gantt chart is entirely useless for forensic delay analysis.
Because it is just a static picture.
Exactly. It's a painting. We need to see the digital architecture, the underlying data, the mathematical logic links in the software. Without the native file, you cannot dynamically model cause and effect.
Okay, so we have the native file. What about the actual granularity of the data? Like if I see an activity called construct terminal building with a duration of 800 days, I'm throwing it out.
As you should. It's meaningless. We look for the 28-day rule.
The 28-day rule, walk us through that.
Generally, no single activity or lag should exceed 28 days in duration.
Why 28 days specifically?
Because it aligns with the standard monthly reporting cycle. It allows for accurate, incremental tracking of progress. If you have an activity called install MEP that spans 6 months and the project finishes late, you have absolutely no way to measure if that MEP work was delayed in week 3, week 12, or week 20.
You just know it took too long at the end.
Right, which is forensically useless.
I get that. But let's be realistic about a massive multi-year infrastructure project. You cannot possibly detail every single wire to be pulled or pipe to be laid 3 years in advance. It's fiction.
It is fiction, which is why the industry accepts rolling wave programming.
Okay, rolling wave. How does that work in practice?
You meticulously detail the activities for the next, say, 6 to 12 months. Those must absolutely obey the 28-day rule.
Okay.
The tasks further out, years down the line, are represented by high-level summary activities.
So they might actually be 200 days long initially.
Exactly. But as the project progresses and the execution time draws nearer, you have a contractual obligation to break those summary activities down into detailed sub-28-day tasks in your regular program update.
So it's constantly expanding as you get closer to the work.
Exactly. It rolls forward.
Okay, let's drill into the logic links, because this is where the actual math happens in the software, and it's where claims are ultimately won or lost. How do we ensure the logic is actually sound and represents a buildable sequence?
Well, the logic links dictate exactly how the CPM software calculates the critical path. If the logic is flawed, the critical path is a lie.
Right.
The most common relationship is the finish to start. Activity B cannot start until activity A has completely finished.
So you cannot put the roof on until the structural walls are up.
That's classic sequential logic, yes.
But heavy civil construction is rarely that perfectly linear.
Right. Which brings us to the lagged finish to start. Here, activity B cannot start until a specific number of days have elapsed after activity A has finished.
Okay, give me an example of that.
The classic example is pouring a massive concrete bridge deck. Activity A is the continuous pour. Activity B is erecting structural steel on top of that deck. But you have a mandatory lag imposed for the concrete curing time.
Physics gets in the way.
Exactly. You cannot start activity B the second the last concrete truck leaves. You have to build a 7-day or 14-day lag into the software logic.
And if that lag is missing in the P6 file,
then the software will tell you that you can build the bridge a week faster than physics actually allows.
which invalidates the whole baseline.
Entirely. Then you have overlapping concurrent work, which is modeled using a start-to-start relationship.
Meaning they kick off at the exact same time.
Right. Activity B can start at the exact same time as activity A, but not before it. But more practically, in heavy civil work, you see the lagged start-to-start.
A lag start to start. Okay, give me a site scenario for that.
Let's say you are excavating a 10-mile trench for a water main. That's activity A. You absolutely do not wait for the entire 10-mile trench to be excavated before you start laying the pipe, which is activity B.
That would be wildly inefficient.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You put a lag in. Laying the pipe starts, say, 5 days after excavation starts. Activity B safely follows right behind activity A.
Got it. And what about the massive overhead costs? The site security, the tower cranes, the project management team. Those tasks span the entire duration of the project. How do you link those?
Those are programmed as level of effort activities. The software calculates their duration dynamically, based entirely on the dates of their predecessors and successors.
So they don't have a fixed duration of their own?
No, they are for support work. They occur continuously during the time frame of specific physical work activities, but they don't drive the completion date themselves.
I see.
If the physical work extends by 2 months, the level of effort activity automatically stretches by 2 months, which is vital later when you are calculating prolongation costs.
So a baseline program isn't just a pretty visual aid, is it? It is a rigorous mathematical model of intent.
A highly complex one, yes.
But as soon as that intent meets the reality of a messy job site, we run into our next major battleground. And this is a massive commercial trap. Let's talk about float.
Float. Float is where commercial relationships go to die.
I want to use an analogy here because I like to think of float as the shock absorbers on a car.
Okay, I like that.
The contractor builds in extra time, float, to be safe. They know materials arrive late. They know it rains.
Right, they pad the schedule.
Then the employer causes a delay. They change a design. That delay eats up the float, removes the shock absorbers. The car is still driving. The final contractual completion date hasn't moved. But the contractor is absolutely screaming that the employer just stole their safety net.
They will scream very loudly, yes.
So I have to ask you the multi-million-dollar question that starts so many fights on site. Who actually owns the float?
It is a brilliant analogy. And the answer, under standard industry guidelines and common law, well, unless you have a very bespoke, heavily amended contract, is that float is not for the exclusive use or benefit of either party.
Really?
Yes. It is owned by the project.
Wait, the contractor priced that risk, they built that schedule, they put the buffer in, but they don't own the safety net they created.
That is the standard position. An extension of time is only granted if the employer delay is mathematically predicted to reduce the total float on the critical path to below zero.
In other words, if the employer's design change merely absorbs the shock absorbers, but doesn't push the actual end date of the whole project, the contractor gets 0 days of EOT.
0 days. The project simply absorbs the delay.
That is brutal.
The employer delay must be critical to meeting the contract completion date before an EOT is due. However, as your analogy points out, this creates a terrifying commercial risk profile for the contractor.
Let's go back to our airport project.
Okay. Let's say the employer is 3 months late handing over a critical section of the site. That delay consumes all the total float right at the start of a 4-year job.
But the completion date hasn't moved yet.
Right, so no EOT is granted, the car is still driving.
But now the contractor is operating with 0 shock absorbers for the next 3.5 years.
Yeah.
Every single bump in the road is a disaster.
Precisely. 6 months later, the contractor has a completely normal minor issue. Say, a specialized subcontractor is a week late delivering structural steel.
Which happens all the time.
Ordinarily, that would be easily absorbed by the float. But because the employer already burned all the float in month 1, that minor contractor delay instantly becomes critical.
It pushes the final completion date.
Yes. And suddenly, the contractor is exposed to millions in liquidated damages for a week-long delay simply because the employer stole the safety net on day 1.
That feels incredibly unbalanced. The employer created the rigid environment, and the contractor pays the ultimate price when they inevitably stumble. I can see why contractors would go to extreme lengths to hide that float from the employer.
Oh, they do. Contractors routinely try to hide float by artificially inflating activity durations.
How do they do that in the software?
They add time risk allowances directly into the specific tasks rather than showing it as open float at the end of a sequence. They'll schedule a 10-day task for 20 days.
Sneaky.
But a skilled forensic assessor reviewing that baseline will spot the inflated durations and strip them right out.
This dynamic must be why different standard forms of contract handle this so differently.
It is. Take the NEC suite of contracts compared to a traditional JCT or FIDC form.
Right.
NEC is fundamentally built around prospective risk management. It demands early warnings, it forces the parties to deal with compensation events and time impacts contemporaneously, almost aggressively.
So you can't just hide from the problem.
Exactly. Under NEC, if an employer burns the float, it is highly visible, and the risk register is updated immediately. Traditional contracts, however, often allow these issues to just fester.
And speaking of letting things fester, let's talk about the contract administrator, because I have seen this 100 times.
We all have.
The contractor submits a massive EOT request in, say, month 4 of a 3-year job, and the CA, wanting to avoid a fight with the employer, just says, well, we acknowledge receipt. Let's just wait and see until the end of the project to see if you actually needed those days. Maybe you'll catch up.
It's infuriating.
How does an assessor or an arbitrator view that wait-and-see approach?
It is viewed as a fundamental dereliction of duty.
Really? That strongly?
Yes. The industry protocols explicitly condemn the wait-and-see approach. EOT applications must be assessed and dealt with as close in time to the delay event as possible. Ideally, the assessment should be completed within 1 month of receiving the contractor's application and all the particulars.
But from the CA's perspective, isn't it safer to wait? Like, why give away time if the contractor might figure out a way to build it faster?
Because it completely destroys the contractor's ability to manage their commercial risk. You have to look at it from their side.
Okay, put me in their shoes.
If a contractor knows they have been formally granted a 3-month EOT, they can proceed normally, they have the relief, they know the new date.
Right.
But if they know their EOT is formally denied, they now have a stark choice. Face ruinous liquidated damages at the end of the job, or spend their own money right now to accelerate, work weekends, and recover the time.
But if the CA plays wait and see, the contractor is trapped in the dark.
Exactly. They don't know their risk profile. If they accelerate and spend millions, and later the CA says, oh, you were entitled to that time anyway, the contractor just burned millions of dollars for absolutely nothing.
And if they don't accelerate?
If they don't accelerate and the CA denies the time at the end of the job, they get hit with massive LDs when it's way too late to mitigate. It is a terrible practice that almost guarantees litigation.
So, if we agree that we must assess the delay contemporaneously, in real time, what is the exact mechanical tool for the job?
The premier tool for a contemporaneous assessment is time impact analysis, or TIA.
TIA.
Yes, this is a purely prospective analysis.
Okay, let's build a scenario. Walk me through the step-by-step mechanics of a TIA. How do you actually prove the future?
Let's use your airport terminal.
Okay.
It's month 12. The employer suddenly issues a massive variation to completely redesign the HVAC system in the main concourse. That is the delay event.
A huge curveball.
Right. So first, you take the most recently accepted updated baseline program, let's say the month 11 update. This schedule accurately reflects all the actual progress and all the actual delays right up to the moment before the HVAC variation was issued.
So you have a perfectly accurate mathematical snapshot of reality just before the bomb drops.
Yes. Next, you create a subnetwork in your CPM software, sometimes called a fragnet.
A fragnet. What is that exactly?
Base. This subnetwork represents the delay event itself. You map out every single new activity required by the variation, redesign the HVAC, get employer approval, procure the new specialized chillers, deliver them, install them, test them.
So a mini schedule of just the change.
Right. You assign durations and logic links to all these new activities.
And then you splice that subnetwork into the month 11 snapshot.
Exactly. You logically link the subnetwork into the updated baseline. For instance, the start of the HVAC redesign is linked to the date the variation was issued.
Okay.
The end of the new HVAC installation is linked to the subsequent finishing works, like dropping the ceiling grid.
Because you can't drop the ceiling until the ducts are in.
Precisely. And then you hit calculate.
Or F9 Primavera P6.
Exactly, hit F9. The software dynamically recalculates the entire critical path through this new spliced-in logic. It projects the prospective impact on the completion date. If the completion date pushes out by 45 days, that is the mathematical basis for your 45-day EOT entitlement.
But here is the critical philosophical point about TIA. It is predicting the future based on what we knew at that exact moment.
Yes.
What if the contractor ends up taking 60 days to do the HVAC work because they messed up the procurement? Or what if they crush it and do it in 30 days? Does the EOT change later?
No. And this is a concept many people struggle with. A true TIA does not look at what actually happened later.
Never.
Never. It models the reasonable predicted impact at the time the event occurred. If the contractor subsequently performs poorly and it takes 60 days, that extra 15 days is their own culpable delay.
And if they work brilliantly and do it in 30 days?
They keep the 15-day gain. The prospective TIA gives the CA the data they need to grant a fair EOT right then and there, permanently allocating the risk.
Which is a beautiful, clean system when events happen in isolation.
Which they never do.
Right. We know construction is never clean. Which brings us to arguably the most complex and litigated topic in our industry, concurrency.
Ah, true concurrent delay. It is the holy grail of construction disputes.
Let's create an absolute nightmare scenario for you. You're building a massive deepwater port facility.
I am with you.
The critical path runs straight through, driving hundreds of steel piles into the seabed. It is Monday morning. The employer totally fails to provide the necessary environmental permits, meaning the marine authorities lock the contractor out of the water.
Okay, an employer risk event. The site is dead.
The site is dead. But on that exact same Monday morning, the contractor's specialized, custom-built piling rig suffers a catastrophic engine failure that will take 2 months to fix.
Ouch. Contractor risk event.
Exactly. Both events stop the critical path dead in its tracks. They start on the same day. They are both entirely at fault.
Okay.
I am the employer. Why on earth should I grant them an EOT and let them off the hook for liquidated damages when they couldn't have driven a single pile anyway because their rig was completely broken?
It is the ultimate paradox. First, we have to establish if this is legally and technically true concurrency, and we have to be precise because true concurrency is exceedingly rare.
Really, contractors claim it all the time.
They do, but most of the time, what people call concurrency is just a messy overlap of minor delays. True concurrency requires the occurrence of 2 or more delay events at the exact same time. One an employer risk event, the other a contractor risk event.
Right.
Their effects must be felt at the same time, and critically, both must be an independent, effective cause of delay to completion.
Meaning they both have to impact the absolute longest critical path. If the broken rig was just doing some minor side work on a breakwater with 6 months afloat, it's not concurrency, it's just a contractor problem.
Exactly. But in your deep water port scenario, both the permit failure and the rig failure independently stopped the primary critical path on the exact same day.
So we have true concurrency.
We do. To resolve this, tribunals and industry protocols generally split the analysis into 2 entirely distinct rules: the rule for time and the rule for money.
Okay, let's start with time. I am the employer. I am screaming that they don't deserve a single day of relief because their rig was broken. Does the contractor get their EOT to avoid my liquidated damages?
Yes, they do.
They do.
The rule for time dictates that the contractor gets the full EOT for the employer delay. The fact that the contractor was also concurrently in delay due to their broken equipment does not reduce their EOT entitlement by a single day.
That feels entirely unjust to the employer.
It feels counterintuitive, but it is heavily influenced by a fundamental centuries-old concept in English common law known as the prevention principle.
The prevention principle, what is that?
The prevention principle essentially dictates that a party, in this case the employer, cannot benefit from their own failure.
Oh, I see.
They cannot enforce a strict contractual obligation, like a completion date backed by massive LDs, if they themselves hindered the contractor's ability to fulfill that obligation.
So by failing to provide the environmental permit, the employer hindered the contractor.
Yes, and the fact that the contractor's rig was broken is legally irrelevant to the employer's breach. The employer cannot take advantage of the contractor's misfortune to levy LDs when the employer themselves caused a critical delay. Therefore, the EOT is granted.
Okay, I can see the legal elegance there. The employer breached, so they lose their right to penalize.
Exactly.
But what about the money? The contractor is stuck on this port project for an extra 2 months. They have millions of dollars in sight, overhead cranes sitting idle, project managers twiddling their thumbs. Do they get paid prolongation costs for that extra time?
That is the rule for money, and the answer is a resounding absolute no.
No money.
The contractor does not get compensation for prolonged overheads during that period of true concurrent delay.
But why not? If the law grants them the time because the employer messed up, shouldn't the law grant them the money for the exact same reason?
Because recovering time and recovering money require different burdens of proof. To recover compensation, the contractor must prove causation. They must prove that the employer's breach actually caused them to suffer a financial loss.
Okay.
If we apply the standard legal but-for test, the contractor's claim falls apart instantly.
Walk me through the but-for test in this port scenario.
You ask the tribunal. But for the employer failing to provide the permit, would the contractor have avoided those overhead costs?
And the answer is no, because their piling rig was catastrophically broken anyway.
Exactly. Even if the employer had handed them the permit on a silver platter on Monday morning, the contractor still would have incurred those exact same overhead costs, sitting idle, waiting for engine parts from Germany.
Wow.
The employer is not liable to pay for time and resources that the contractor would have lost regardless of the employer's breach.
That is a brilliant separation. They get the time defensively to avoid LDs based on the prevention principle, but they are denied the money offensively because they fail the but-for causation test.
Exactly. It prevents either party from receiving a windfall from a situation where both are at fault.
But this entire elegant theory relies on being able to perfectly untangle these events as they happen. Which brings us to the harshest reality of our industry. What happens when the project is already over?
Oh, the post-mortem.
It's a smoking crater of litigation. You can't run a prospective time impact analysis because the future has already happened. The daily logs are a mess. The schedule updates were abandoned in year 2. How do you reverse engineer a disaster?
This is where we bring out the heavy artillery of retrospective forensic delay analysis. TIA is a tool of contract administration. But when we enter the realm of dispute resolution arbitration or litigation months or years after completion, the rules of engagement change completely.
So how do you retroactively prove who delayed what without just relying on a crystal ball in reverse?
The first thing a tribunal will want you to define is whether your methodology is a cause and effect method or an effect and cause method.
Explain the difference between those two.
Cause and effect means you start by identifying a specific historical event, the cause, like a late design drawing, and then you model its impact forward through the as-built data to see what delay it theoretically produced.
Okay, starting at the beginning and working forward.
Right. Effect and cause is the exact reverse. You start by looking at the actual undeniable critical delay at the end of a specific period, the effect, and then you hunt backwards through the historical records to figure out what real-world event actually caused it.
Which does the industry prefer?
The industry, and particularly the standard protocols, generally consider effect and cause methods to be far more forensically reliable for retrospective analysis.
Why is that?
Because they consider all potential causes of the actual delay incurred, including the contractor's own failures, rather than just building theoretical models of a single employer event in isolation. It's grounded in reality.
Okay, so if I have a mega project and I actually have decent records, what is the absolute gold standard methodology? What is the heaviest weapon in the arsenal?
The premier effect and cause methodology is the time slice windows analysis.
Time slice windows.
It is incredibly rigorous, deeply mathematical, and practically bulletproof if done correctly.
I want to spend some serious time here. Let's build a massive hypothetical case study. Let's say we are analyzing a high-speed rail tunneling project.
Sounds fun.
It's supposed to take 3 years. It took 4. We have millions of documents. Walk me through a time slice windows analysis, step by step, month by month. How does the analyst actually do it?
First, you take the entire 3-year project duration and you chop it up into smaller windows or time slices.
How big is the slice?
Usually these are monthly windows aligned with the contemporaneous schedule updates. To do this, you absolutely must have a series of highly accurate native CPM baseline programs that were updated at the end of every single month.
So you're basically taking a hard mathematical snapshot of the project every 30 days.
Exactly. Let's look at window 1, January. You take the baseline program from January 1st and you compare it to the updated program on January 31st. The analyst uses the software to determine what the actual critical path was during January.
Okay, let's say the critical path was assembling the massive tunnel boring machine, the TBM.
Right. You compare the planned completion date on Jan 1st with the projected completion date on Jan 31st.
Let's say this software shows the project completion date slipped by 12 days in January.
Okay, that 12-day slip is the effect. You have mathematically proven the delay occurred in that specific window on that specific path.
And then?
Now, the human element takes over. You dive into the contemporaneous records for January, the site diaries, the QA/QC reports, the daily weather logs, the email correspondence. You investigate why the TBM assembly took 12 days longer.
Let's say the records show the employer's customs agent failed to clear a critical hydraulic component at the port.
Perfect. You've identified the cause. You allocate those 12 days of critical delay to the employer. You lock that window down.
Window 1 is done.
Now, you move to window 2, February. You take the Feb 1st schedule and compare it to Feb 28th. But here is the genius of the windows analysis. The critical path can and will shift.
Right, because the TBM is built now. It's drilling.
Exactly. Maybe in February, the critical path shifts away from the TBM and onto the procurement of the precast concrete tunnel lining segments. You run the math for February, you find a 20-day snip.
Then back to the documents.
You dive into the February records, you find out the concrete supplier, the contractor's subcontractor, went bankrupt.
Contractor risk.
Yes. So those 20 days are allocated strictly to the contractor. You do this exhaustive, iterative process for every single month, window by window, accumulating the delay, tracking the shifting critical path, and allocating responsibility based on the actual facts on the ground during that specific 30-day slice of time.
That sounds incredibly labor-intensive. You're talking about thousands of hours of forensic document review married to complex software analysis.
It costs millions of dollars to run this analysis on a mega project, but it is practically bulletproof in cross-examination because you aren't relying on theory. You are demonstrating exactly what happened on the ground incrementally and proving causation beyond a shadow of a doubt.
But here is the fatal flaw in your gold standard.
What's that?
It requires highly accurate, contemporaneously updated CPM programs for every single month. We both know that on troubled projects, the schedule is the very first casualty of war. By month 6, the contractor stops updating it because it looks too terrible.
That is unfortunately very true.
If your native files are garbage or non-existent, you can't run a time slice. What do you do then?
If the baseline updates are unreliable, we have to abandon the software-driven time slice and move to a more manual method, the as-planned versus as-built windows analysis.
How is that different?
This is also an effect and cause method, but it relies far less on CPM software algorithms and much more on the subjective practical analysis effects by the expert.
How does that work without the software doing the heavy mathematical lifting to find the critical path?
The analyst must determine the actual critical path in each window by manually reviewing the facts. You map out the major milestones and the actual real-world sequence of works. You compare the key dates on the actual as-built chronology against the dates that were originally planned.
So you are building the timeline yourself?
Yes. You identify the variance, the delay, and then again, you hunt through the records to find the cause.
But without the software calculating the float and the logic links, aren't you just guessing what was critical? Like if two things are happening at once, how do you prove which one was driving the end date?
You aren't guessing, but you are relying heavily on professional judgment. The human analyst must write a narrative report clearly setting out their rationale and common sense reasoning for why they determined a specific path was critical.
Give me an example of that reasoning.
For example, it is physically impossible to lay track before the tunnel is bored, therefore the tunnel boring was the critical path, regardless of what the procurement schedule says.
That sounds incredibly subjective. I imagine cross-examination on this method is brutal.
It is absolutely fierce. Opposing counsel will attack every single assumption you made. They will try to prove your subjective critical path was wrong.
Are there other options? What about cause and effect retrospective methods?
The most common is the collapsed as built analysis.
Collapsed as built. That sounds destructive.
It is fascinating mathematically. You take the final, completely chaotic as built schedule, the messy reality of what actually happened, then you logically link all the delay events into that schedule.
Okay, so you have a massive web of actual work and actual delays.
Yes. Then you mathematically subtract or collapse the delay events you want to test. Let's say you represent the contractor. You subtract all the employer's delay events from the software model.
Like removing the Jenga blocks.
Exactly. And you see what happens to the completion date. If you mathematically extract 50 days of employer delay, and the software calculates that the project would have finished 50 days earlier, you have proven your claim.
But what if you extract the 50 days of employer delay, and the completion date only pulls back by 10 days?
Then the software has just mathematically proven that the contractor was concurrently delayed by 40 days of their own issues. The collapsed as built is a very powerful visual and mathematical tool, but it is heavily criticized because it relies on injecting theoretical logic into an as-built schedule, which can easily be manipulated by the analyst.
It sounds like choosing the right weapon is half the battle.
The choice depends on a matrix of factors. The specific terms of the contract, NEC versus ED, will dictate different approaches. The nature of the causative events, the sheer value of the dispute, the time available before the arbitration hearing, and most importantly, the nature, extent, and quality of the records available.
Right.
You cannot build a skyscraper on a foundation of sand, and you cannot perform a time slice analysis on a project with no schedules.
Okay, we've thoroughly mapped the time. We know how to prospectively predict it and retrospectively prove who caused the delay. But as we established in the very beginning, time is only half the battle.
Now for the money.
Now we have to map the money. Which brings us to disruption, acceleration, and the absolute highest stakes financial claims. Proving a loss of productivity and claiming the associated costs is notoriously difficult. And I see contractors make a massive, lazy mistake here all the time.
The dreaded global claim.
Yes, the global claim. They get to the end of a chaotic 4-year job. They look at the massive black hole in their accounting ledger. They plan to spend $100 million. They actually spend $150 million.
A $50 million bath.
Right. So they shrug, they bundle it all into a massive binder, and they submit a global claim. They basically point at the employer and say, you issued 1,000 variations, you caused all these disruptions, so you owe us the entire $50 million difference. As an assessor or an arbitrator, does that ever actually work?
The commercial reality is the exact opposite of what contractors hope. While courts in some jurisdictions have occasionally shown a slight degree of leniency in incredibly rare, highly specific circumstances.
But
Generally, the standard industry guidelines and seasoned quantum practitioners strongly condemn global claims. They're incredibly dangerous. They are the hallmark of a lazy or desperate contractor.
But play devil's advocate for a second. If the project was a total mess, and it genuinely was the employer's fault for issuing 1,000 variations, shouldn't the employer pay the difference? Why force the contractor to mathematically prove every single bolt?
Because a global claim fundamentally fails to establish a direct causal link between a specific employer breach and a specific financial loss. You were just saying A happened and Z happened, therefore A caused Z.
Without connecting the dots.
Right. And here is the fatal structural flaw of the global claim, which arbitrators look for immediately.
What's the trap?
If the arbitrator finds that even a material part of that $50 million global loss was caused by something the contractor is actually responsible for, the entire claim shatters.
Give me an example of what they might be responsible for.
The most common is a tender error. The contractor intentionally underbid the job by $10 million just to win the contract, hoping to make it up in variations.
It happens all the time.
Or they suffered from their own internal inefficiencies. Their concrete subcontractor was terrible and wasted $5 million. If the arbitrator identifies that $15 million of the loss is contractor risk, and the contractor hasn't provided a methodology to separate that $15 million from the $15 million global sum, the entire claim fails.
Wow. Wait, really? So if a contractor submits a $50 million global claim, and the arbitrator proves that $5 million of that was due to the contractor's own poor pricing, they don't just get the claim reduced to $45 million, they get absolutely zero.
In many jurisdictions, yes, they get zero. If the non-recoverable portion cannot be accurately untangled from the global sum, the house of cards collapses. The tribunal will not do the math for you.
That is a terrifying risk to take.
It is. That is why you must avoid global claims at all costs and use precise, targeted disruption analysis methodologies.
Okay, so if we can't be lazy, how do you properly prove disruption? How do you mathematically prove to an arbitrator that pouring that specific concrete slab took twice as many man-hours exclusively because the employer kept changing the rebar design and not just because your guys were slow?
We look at productivity or cost-based methods. But again, simple high-level formulas are unpersuasive. You must perform a detailed, granular analysis. The most widely accepted method is the measured mile analysis.
The measured mile. Explain that.
You compare the disrupted work against an undisrupted baseline on the exact same project.
Okay, how do you find that?
You find a period, the measured mile, where the contractor was laying pipe without any employer interference. You calculate the productivity. Let's say they laid 100 feet of pipe per day with a 10-man crew.
That's your baseline.
Then you look at the disrupted period where the employer was constantly issuing variations. In that period, the same 10-man crew only laid 40 feet of pipe per day.
So the variance, the 60 feet per day, is the mathematically proven loss of productivity caused by the disruption.
Exactly. It accounts for the contractor's actual inherent efficiency on that specific site, stripping away arguments about tender errors, because they prove they could do it efficiently when left alone.
But what if the whole project was a disaster from day one? What if there is no measured mile of normal work because the employer was interfering from the moment the shovel hit the dirt? What do you do on a multi-billion-dollar mega project with tens of thousands of overlapping, compounding disruptions?
That is the frontier. When you reach the bleeding edge of massive, complex disputes where traditional spreadsheets fail, forensic experts are increasingly turning to system dynamics modeling.
I love this concept. Explain how system dynamics works in a construction dispute.
It is a highly advanced, mathematically rigorous computer simulation approach. Instead of just looking at linear spreadsheets, experts use specialist software to create a comprehensive digital twin of the disrupted project.
A digital twin.
Yes. This model replicates the insanely complex, nonlinear relationships and feedback loops that actually influence labor productivity on a mega project.
What kind of variables are we talking about inputting?
It models the physical workflow, the supply chain constraints, the RFI approvals process. But critically, it mathematically models human factors.
Human factors, like what?
If you mandate 60-hour work weeks for 3 months, a system dynamics model will calculate the exact degradation in labor productivity due to physical fatigue.
Oh, wow.
It models the loss of the learning curve when trades are constantly moved from one area to another due to piecemeal access. It models the cascading effect of rework on morale.
So you input all the actual data, all the variations, the actual delays, the thousands of extra labor hours, the overtime?
Yes. You build a model that perfectly reproduces the actual disastrous real-world outcome of the project. You tune the algorithms until the digital twin matches reality.
And then what?
Once you have validated that the model accurately reflects the disaster, you do something truly remarkable for the tribunal. You simulate a but-for scenario.
You rewrite history.
Mathematically, yes. You take the digital twin and you extract the specific claim items, the employer's disruptions. You strip out the late design changes, the out-of-sequence access, the denied permits.
The Jenga blocks again?
Exactly. You then rerun the massive simulation without those employer-caused issues. The model calculates how the project would have performed.
And the difference.
The mathematical delta, the difference between the actual model and the but-for model, proves the exact loss of productivity and cost caused exclusively by the employer.
That is mind-blowing. It's like playing SimCity, but instead of just building a digital town, you are using the simulation's underlying physics engine to win a $100 million arbitration.
It is an incredibly powerful visual and mathematical tool for an arbitrator, but it is also exceptionally expensive, takes months to build, and requires highly specialized PhD-level experts to defend the underlying algorithms under brutal cross-examination.
Let's touch on one final explosive commercial pressure point before we wrap up. Acceleration. We mentioned it earlier as a panicked reaction to a delay. But there are different legal types of acceleration, right? Constructive versus directed.
Yes, and confusing them is a very expensive mistake. Directed acceleration is simple and clean. The contract often has a specific mechanism where the employer explicitly instructs the contractor to accelerate.
Like work weekends, add night shifts, bring in more cranes.
Right. Either to finish early or to recover time lost to an employer delay. Crucially, the basis of payment for this extra effort should be agreed upon, in writing, before the acceleration starts.
But what about constructive acceleration? That's the messy one where the contractor acts unilaterally.
Very messy and highly contentious. Constructive acceleration happens when the contractor firmly considers they are entitled to an EOT due to an employer delay, but the contract administrator stubbornly refuses to grant it.
The wait-and-see trap.
Exactly. The contractor is staring down the barrel of massive liquidated damages. They feel commercially forced to accelerate at their own immense cost to hit the original, unextended deadline, simply to avoid the LDs.
And then, after the job is done, they submit a massive claim for constructive acceleration, demanding the employer pay for all those weekend shifts and extra cranes.
Exactly.
But look at it from the employer's side. If I'm the employer, I didn't authorize that overtime. I didn't ask for the extra cranes. How does an assessor or a tribunal look kindly on a contractor just spending millions of dollars and springing a surprise bill at the end?
They don't look kindly on it at all unless very strict protocols are followed. The industry guidelines are crystal clear on this. Before a contractor implements costly acceleration measures to pursue a constructive acceleration claim, they must first take explicit formal steps to have the dispute about their EOT entitlement resolved.
So they have to exhaust the contract's dispute mechanisms first.
Yes. You must put the employer firmly on notice. You say, "We believe we are entitled to 30 days. You have denied it. If you do not grant this EOT within 7 days, we will be forced to accelerate to mitigate your liquidated damages, and we will hold you entirely liable for the costs."
So you can't be sneaky about it.
You cannot just silently accelerate in the background and hand them an invoice a year later.
Because if the employer actually understood that the contractor was about to spend $10 million in overtime to recover 3 days of schedule, the employer might have just looked at the math and said, "You know what? Don't bother. We'll just grant you the 3 days. It's cheaper."
Precisely. The core of commercial project management is giving the parties the opportunity to manage their own financial risk. If you hide the acceleration, you steal the employer's right to choose the cheapest path forward.
Okay, we have covered immense, highly technical ground in this masterclass. We started by drawing the absolute hard line between delay, which is about time, the critical path, and securing EOTs defensively, and disruption, which is about lost productivity and claiming money offensively.
We did. We established the non-negotiable necessity of native CPM records, tracking the 28-day rule, and rigorously defending logic links.
We navigated the commercial trap of float ownership, establishing that float is a project asset, and highlighted how standard forms like NEC attempt to mitigate the massive risks of the wait-and-see approach by forcing contemporaneous time impact analysis.
And we untangled the paradox of true concurrent delay, using the prevention principle to elegantly separate the contractor's entitlement to defensive time from their inability to claim offensive money due to the but-for test.
We transitioned into the grueling reality of retrospective analysis, breaking down the massive evidentiary burden of a month-by-month time-slice windows analysis versus the subjective vulnerabilities of an as-planned versus as-built review.
And finally, we exposed the fatal structural risks of submitting lazy global claims, explored the cutting-edge mathematical realm of system dynamics modeling to prove complex disruption, and clarified the strict notice protocols required before a contractor can ever hope to claim constructive acceleration.
It is a phenomenal, treacherous landscape. And mastering these specific commercial mechanics is exactly what separates an amateur claiming everything was a mess from a true quantum professional in a high-stakes arbitration.
Absolutely.
Now, before we sign off, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over. We just spent an hour discussing highly complex, heavily manual forensic analyses. We talked about analysts manually verifying logic links, spending thousands of hours reading daily site diaries to attribute causality in a time slice analysis, and relying on subjective, professional human judgment to defend an as-built critical path in cross-examination.
We even talked about system dynamics modeling, which requires specialized PhDs to tune the algorithms.
Right, but look at the horizon. We are moving incredibly rapidly toward an era where artificial intelligence can instantly ingest native CPM files, cross-reference them with real-time site drone footage, process thousands of daily logs, weather reports, and emails simultaneously, and instantly output a mathematical critical path. So the question is, as these AI tools become standard on mega projects, will the art of the human delay analyst become obsolete? Or will the interpretation of abstract legal concepts like true concurrency, the prevention principle, and common sense logic links always require the subjective nuance of a human expert's judgment to actually convince an arbitrator? Think about it.